Vincent van Gogh. I can't even remember the first time I saw his work. It just feels like it's always been there. He's always been one of my favorite artists. And revisiting his paintings for this video reminded me exactly why his art has such a universal appeal. Today, I want to show you how you can take inspiration from your favorite artworks of his and turn that into something original for your sketchbook or beyond. So let's begin with his most recognizable masterpiece and one of the most famous paintings in the world, The Starry Night. I wanted to take a little bit of the magic of this painting we all love into my sketchbook. To start, I wanted a solid background with no white space, so I just spread acrylic paint with a wedge. Easy and fast drying. For the rest, I used this brand new set of acrylic markers Artex sent me. I thought the huge variety of color and the ready-to-use markers with brush tips made them perfect to recreate all the different strokes found in Van Gogh's signature impasto technique. This famous painting, originally titled in French La Nuit Étoilée, is a representation of the view of his room at a mental asylum in France. Yes, we'll get to that later. But it is significant because he didn't paint this scene exactly as he saw it, but combined from his imagination and other elements to tie in the composition. For my page, I also used part of the view from my window. I started by drawing the beautiful big mountain I see from outside my studio. And then I also added a huge moon, which I put on the opposite side from where it is at the original composition. I'm changing things up because I'm not looking to create copies. I want to be inspired and use this as a learning opportunity. This is why I also changed the colors. I'm using purples and teals and not the colors from the original painting. I also did not draw a big element on the foreground like he did with his cypress tree, and I only have 3 stars on mine. I started to block out some colors in the sky, keeping to these wavy motifs he used. And when it was almost fully covered, I started drawing little lines with different colors, trying to build them up to emulate the impasto effect he's so famous for. Impasto is this technique where paint is applied thickly so that the brushstrokes or palette knife marks are visible and you can create texture and a little bit of a three-dimensional effect. Of course, he created his with thick oil paint, but for my purposes, the acrylic markers in different colors were perfect because I could just switch colors and keep adding and adding little lines to get a similar visual effect. As I work, let me quickly debunk some myths around Van Gogh. I understand part of his appeal comes from the stories around him, and knowing he had a tortured nature connects us to him through the human experience. And the part of the story we hear a lot and romanticize is that he was insane, that he was a loner with no recognition while he was alive, and that's where his style came from. But all of this is not true. He painted only when he was completely sane, which was about 75% of the time. And then he had poorly diagnosed manic episodes, which are now thought to be the result of bipolar disorder and syphilis. These episodes did make him question his place in the world, but were not the source of his artistic genius. He came up with his style through a lot of observation and really hard work. He was a really disciplined artist. He only created art for less than 10 years, and in that time he made over 2,000 pieces, so he was very prolific. And most of his oil paintings he created on the last 2 years of his life, where he had developed his own language based in color. He painted mostly from observation except for this piece because he saw the beautiful night scene at night when it was too dark to paint, so he composed it a bit from his imagination too. I kept working from my imagination as well because other than the mountain, everything else is fiction. I was trying to get the morning fog that he had on his painting as well, and then just kept making stuff to fill my space. So, of course, I also added a village that I cannot see from my window either. With the original Starry Night, it's the same thing. He could not really see the village from this window where he saw this night view. He was just interpreting the beautiful night sky. Because can you imagine how beautiful and bright those stars were in the 1800s where there was no electricity? He could actually see the Milky Way. Now, he added this little town, which is not the actual town he could actually see from the other side of the asylum. This is much smaller than what reality was. And also, the church he paints is a Dutch church and not a French one. He also paints this big cypress tree in the foreground when the cypress trees he could see from his window were much smaller. He was really working on the composition and expressing what he felt in this painting. And this is what makes this painting so important as well, because it's a step toward modernism. Here, he painted something we can't really see. He showed the sky full of movement and life. And this is so important because it shows an artist switching from narrative to expression using new ways of seeing. I think we take this for granted today because now we paint anything we want, any colors, pure creation. But it was artists like Van Gogh that paved the road we now use. That's why I can easily add all of these colorful strokes in my page and feel confident about them. I was done, so I removed the tape, and here it is. A page that's clearly inspired by Van Gogh's masterpiece, clearly in his style. And because I have it on the same sketchbook, I wanted to compare it with the page I'd made of the same view, but inspired by Picasso. I love it. Same view, but how wonderfully different the two pages are. This is so educational and enlightening for me. Okay, let's move on. Starry Night he created towards the end of his short-lived artist career, but that's not where he started. He started with work that was gloomy and dark and where his recognizable colors were not yet present. And that's what I want to create now, a moody landscape inspired on these early works. Look at this painting, the colors really appeal to me. Again, I started by putting a tape border on my page and then covering the whole background with some acrylic paint. Then I picked a color palette from the box. It looks so great. So I started drawing all of the elements of my landscape, and I'm drawing something super close to what Van Gogh did. Obviously changing a little bit of the composition because I have a different format of paper. Then I started filling in the sky, layering my different tones of yellow and blending a little bit with my fingertips. With the sky done, I worked on the horizon, starting to detail things, mixing brown and black together to get the tone I wanted. These first paintings are so different from his signature style, and he created them while he was still living in the Netherlands. Which, by the way, Vincent van Gogh is Dutch, not French. The thing is, he spent most of his years as an artist in France. And it was in France where he decided to sign his paintings as Vincent only, because he said French could not pronounce Van Gogh properly. I don't think I'm doing it right either. Here's the correct pronunciation in Dutch.
Van Gogh, Van Gogh. Not Van Gogh, not Van Gogh, but Van Gogh.
Okay then, so I guess I just cannot pronounce it right. It's so interesting how much we know about him from the immense and incredibly detailed correspondence he kept, mostly with his brother. Mind you, he was a very educated man. He even spoke 4 languages. And he decided he wanted to be an artist at 27 and threw himself into the practice. I love that his letters are so detailed, they even include sketches of some of the paintings, complete with color scheme descriptions. Anyhow, these darker paintings depicted the common field workers of his home in the rural town of Nuenen. He thought peasants were more interesting. He didn't care for depicting wealth. His subjects are always close to the human condition or nature. So out of the almost 10 years he created art, 5 were spent with him painting in this darker, earth tone, gloomy, shadowed style. And only on the second half of his artistic life is where he started to explore beyond that and found his own language. So I finished my moody landscape too, really loving the earth tones. I removed the tape, fixed a little paint leakage with a white marker, and here it is. Oh, I love it. I like it way more than the first page, inspired by the more famous painting. Just look at it mocked up in space. I think it's so nice. Okay, let's move forward. And like I said, Van Gogh spent a lot of time experimenting, drawing a variety of subjects. So his work has inspired me to sketch something I've never drawn before, my shoes. I started by drawing them, and I was thinking how interesting it is that we stare at a blank page for so long, wondering what to draw, and there are so many things that I personally have never tried. that don't even come to my mind. From Picasso, it was pigeons, and now I have shoes. So now you know that if you're feeling uninspired, all you need to do is look a bit into art history for the most basic inspiration. I finished my sketch, so what now? I realized it is not a subject I'm incredibly interested in, but I wanted to do a little bit more, so I started to add color. Still, very sketchy strokes since I couldn't be bothered to paint them realistically. I wanted to move fast and keep the page sketchy, and also applied what I was learning from Van Gogh's artistic journey by trying things and creating until I can come up with my own language too. I wouldn't call my try at a shoe painting a success. It's just a little sketch, but I like the result for a 20-minute drawing, and it was a good exercise that inspired me to sketch something else that I see every day. My lovely artificial plant that I've painted on a video that I love, love, love. I drew it on my page directly with a marker. I was excited about this one. And while I do that, let's go back to a little history. Vincent, we are on a first name basis now. Nah, it's just easier for me to pronounce. Well, he moved to Paris for 2 years to live with his brother. And of course, upon his arrival to Paris, he was in awe with all the beautiful art. His brother had criticized his previous dark work and talked to him about Impressionism in letters, but of course, he had replied he couldn't understand what he meant, but once he stepped in Paris, of course he could. He became friends with a lot of the Impressionists, and you can see during his time he was a little bit all over the place. He was trying Impressionism, he was trying Pointillism. He had all of these paintings in which his style wasn't clear at all, but he was clearly in an exploration phase. And I think this is the part that I love the most personally, because it's almost like we believe that artists just come up with their style and they work on it and that's it. But here we can easily see, because Vincent's artistic journey was sadly short, that he started in a style that was closest to him, and then he practiced and tried and explored, influenced by the work of other artists, and he found his own voice. And he did this at the very last 2 years of his life, sadly. But during these 2 years, he experimented a lot, and this is exactly what I'm going to do with my little plant sketch. I put color in every leaf, and for the backgrounds, I took a approach that's more similar to Van Gogh's style, using clear strokes instead of blending. In the tabletop especially, I left my strokes to be super visible. Then after the backgrounds were completed, I started to add the colorful paint strokes on my plant, and this was as much fun as it was to paint them on the actual plant. And really, really easy, because again, these markers, you don't need to activate them, you don't need to do anything, you just take the cap off and go. They are perfect for this type of painting. And again, using the markers, I added a little bit of texture to the background because that's what Van Gogh did with his paintings. I also decided to outline everything for more contrast, and this is my second sketch of the day. Neither are perfect, but I really enjoyed the process and I learned a lot from these. Moving on, I printed a photo of myself because basically I cannot do a Van Gogh inspired video and not try to do a self portrait. Why? Because in his short 9 years of painting, Vincent, my buddy, painted over 36 self portraits. Imagine that. So I'm just going to take this off camera because the next step is boring. And they're back, and I taped an edge on my page and created a grid on both spaces. I definitely needed a grid to even try this. It was super daunting for me. I've never done a self portrait before, ever. The only time I've been close to painting one was when I made this video that nobody watched. And I used a TikTok filter to see how AI would paint me when I took a picture. And then I tried to copy that painting, which honestly did not look very much like me anyhow. Well, I created my drawing, trying my best to make it as accurate as I could with the grids, and it already looks wonky and not like me at all. And it's so funny how easy I can see now that I'm editing and I have a different perspective where my mistakes were. Yeah, that eye on the right side is way too low, way too big. I made the nose too wide, the mouth is too high. Well, so many mistakes. But right then, I couldn't tell and I carried on. I also came in knowing that this portrait was not going to be perfect because being a sketchbook video, I obviously had a limited amount of time for this page. So I started to paint with a purple marker to get similar undertones as the ones I found in the reference Vincent portrait I was using. I then added more color, trying to emulate his style as best as I could, layering skin tones and making my strokes apparent. I gotta tell you, this part of the edit is getting rough for me because I want to reach into the screen and fix all of the things I now see. So bad. But of course, I can't. So let me continue to yap about my process and our new bestie, Vincent. So, like I said at the beginning, he admitted himself into the asylum in Saint Remy, and this was after he lived with his brother in Paris, and also after he lived in Arles by himself in the famous little yellow house where he painted the recognizable piece depicting his bedroom. His ambition for this house was to have a little hub for artists in the south of France. This never came into completion, but he did convince his friend Gogh to live with him there. This only lasted a little over 60 days, but the artists did share the space and work there at the same time. He only managed to convince Gogh to join him by offering him the luxury of not having to work but only paint, since his brother Theo could pay for the keep of both of them. But like I said, it didn't last long, and the artists had a fight of some sort, which triggered one of Vincent's manic attacks, during which he famously sliced a piece of his ear off, and apparently he took it to one of his favorite hookers. After the fact, he didn't recall the episode at all, so he committed himself to the asylum for an entire year where he created 159 paintings. These paintings were his depictions of the gardens in the asylums and the views he had from his room. And this was a progressive place. They believed nature and gardens healed. And because it was progressive, they also gave him a studio space to paint, and he was even able to leave the grounds to get different perspectives. They realized creating kept him sane. But back to my portrait, I finished painting most of the face and I started to do the hair by layering lots of colors. When I realized I needed to have the background done before adding more to the hair. So again, here I tried to copy his style for the backgrounds by having many colors layered and giving it movement, much like we painted the first page inspired by the Starry Night. Did I mention he thought that painting was a failure? He didn't even realize yet the bridges he was building for modern art. By the way, although it is true that he only sold one painting in his lifetime, it is not true that he died in total obscurity. The painting he sold was at a very recognizable exhibition in Brussels, where the work of Renoir and Cézanne was shown too. He also had received great praise from an art critic in a publication, and 2 months before his death, 10 of his paintings were sent to be shown at Paris, where even the president of France attended. He was actually on the brink of fame, and he was well known and being very respected by the rest of the artists of his time. He didn't die alone, but in the arms of his brother, 36 hours after he shot himself, and his funeral was well attended, so not a loner at all. After the background, I added highlights all over the hair and kept layering and layering to try to get the effect I wanted. And honestly, it's a nice drawing for the almost 2 hours it took me. It's not bad, but it just doesn't look anything like me. I finished by adding black details to the eyes and contour to the face and some other strokes to create details like the jewelry. And after removing my tape, here's the result. My daughter says it looks like my cousin, so I guess that's good enough. Definitely doesn't look like me, but I love doing this exercise so much, I might try it again. Moving on, I just had to paint some sunflowers. Van Gogh is so recognized by this series, I couldn't help myself. He started painting these during his time at Arles. There were so many fields planted with them to make oil, so they were easily available to him. While they weren't available to me, I did not have any sunflowers laying around my house, but I decided to draw some based on a reference picture I found online. Once I had my drawing done, it was time, of course, to paint them. I chose this analog color palette, taking colors only from the flowers. At first, I grabbed this brown for the background, but once I covered it completely, it looked so dark. Nothing like his joyous paintings of flowers. So I went over the entire thing with teal. It was looking a little better, but still dark. So I again painted on top with a lighter shade that I blended with an ivory to make it even lighter. I also lightened the color of the table and then started painting the green parts of my flower arrangement. His sunflower paintings are probably his most famous series. I see them everywhere, and I've heard he's recognized as the painter of sunflowers. Although he did paint other types of flowers too. It's interesting to know he painted the first four inarls in a single week to decorate the room where he planned to welcome Gogh. And apparently, Gogh did not like having these paintings in his room at all. He thought it was way too much yellow. Well, I was loving trying to make this piece as bright as his using all of the yellows I had. Of course, it doesn't look as bright because I didn't make the background yellow, but I still think it's a bright picture. Once I was done with the flowers, it was time to move to the vase, and I completely disregarded my reference image and I painted it just like he did in his paintings, dividing it onto two parts and using very light colors. I really enjoyed this page. I had so much fun with it, and I think it turned out crazy good. I love it. And I was about to move on from it when I thought it would be a nice detail to sign my name on the vase just like he did there. Now we can move to the next one. And I want to use this lovely painting, Whitfield with Reaper, as inspo. Painted again during his time in the asylum in his last year of life. He died only a little over 2 months later in Auvers. Again, I have a tape border on, and I've gotten so many comments on why I use washi tape when it's more expensive. Well, I actually got this set of 60 rolls at Amazon for $10, so that's like 15 cents per roll. And I've used so much of it, and it's still nowhere close to be running out. I even used this set to color an entire page of my coloring book using washi tape. So it actually turns out to be pretty cheap, and using the colored tapes and patterns just makes me happy. I'll link the box of tape for anyone who's interested in the description. So, back to the painting, what I wanted to take from the original was not the theme, but the color palette and the diagonal of the composition. So, I'm drawing a landscape in my style and I'm copying his color palette. I think the colors are incredible and I want to try to get that on my page. When I think of Van Gogh, I definitely think of bright yellows and stunning blues. At first, when I painted the sky, it was a little bit too dark, but little by little, I layered it and I gave it texture with my markers until I landed on a lighter color that I liked and was more similar to the painting. Same thing for the rest of the elements, using purple, greens, and of course yellow for the mountains and fields. Again, here my Artex markers are perfect for the job. I have so many colors I can use, and you would think with all of the colors surrounding me, the box would be empty, but there's still so many colors I can reach for. 120 colors is a lot. I'm very happy with the set. After I had all of my solid colors on, I wanted to start to slowly add texture to each area. The color of the lines I chose to go on top is inspired by Vince's layering, but these parallel repetitive lines are something I've always added to my abstract landscapes to symbolize the terrain. About halfway of adding lines, I thought my landscape was looking super dark and not communicating that wonderful, vibrant, happy yellow that screams Van Gogh. So I tried to brighten mine up by adding even more lines of different shades of yellow to lighten the page in its entirety. As an afterthought, I think maybe I should have made the purple areas thinner, but in a way, I really love how my composition turned out too, even with this big difference. To wrap it up, I added a couple of vibration lines in a very light color, removed the tape, and here is the aftermath of a sketchbook video. And my last page for this particular book with a beautiful landscape. I am very happy with this one, so why not? Let's see it in a space. And that is it. Here's everything we made today. I'm so happy I created this video. I learned so much more about one of my favorite artists, and he gave me great lessons, not only in style and composition, but also he showed me that it's never too late to start following your passion, and that if you really give it your heart, you can achieve a lot. He achieved more than most in just a short time, using it mostly to learn and practice, and then with his final years dedicated to apply everything that inspired him and develop in his own style. I truly hope you enjoyed this video and that I'll see you next Friday with a brand new one. And if you haven't seen them yet, go check my Klimt and Picasso inspired videos too. With that, I hope you're having the most wonderful day. Bye!